From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. Thursday, September 26th, 2024. We've got a packed show for all of y'all today. So let's not let any time go by because we've got to get into a lot of things today. And I'm in fuego. I'm on fire. I'm telling you. Just buckle up, get ready. Here we go. All right. So without further ado, though, let's go ahead and get started on today's show. With our kind of tradition, a coffee cup cheers. I've got my double espresso this morning. Join me with whatever you're drinking, and coffee cup cheers, y'all. This thing right there above my head says we do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. It was a statement by JFK, and I'll tell you why I say that now. It's because in an exclusive breaking news story here from the Wall Street Journal, we now know that a China-linked threat actor has been breaching US ISPs in what they're calling now Salt Typhoon attack intrusion on the critical infrastructure. This new report kind of coming out from the FBI, essentially saying Salt Typhoon, which hasn't been previously disclosed, is the latest threat actor behind a series of incursions linked to specific internet service providers in recent months in pursuit of sensitive information. You might ask yourself, what sensitive information could they be after? Well, they don't say that here, but you can just imagine what the Chinese are looking for. They're looking to understand traffic patterns. They're looking to understand where people are going. That helps them influence. That helps them gain insights. They're looking to potentially see where specific individuals or companies really redirect their traffic and where things are going. Salt Typhoon is the actor that's been linked to these types of attacks on broadband networks. Investigators are trying to assess how they gained access to these networks. One assumption at the moment not been verified is that they have potentially used Cisco system routers or core network components that route much of the traffic on the internet. A Cisco spokesperson said that they're investigating the matter, and as of right now, there's no indication that any Cisco routers were involved in the breach. Microsoft's also investigating to see investigating the intrusion and what sensitive information may have been accessed, according to people familiar with the matter. China has been making it a practice to gain access to ISPs around the world. They do it in Southeast Asia. They do it in the Middle East. They do it in Europe. They're just constantly going after this. So Glenn Grestall, which was a former general counsel over at the NSA, says this would be alarming but not surprising. This is the expansion of their malicious use of cyber to gain the upper hand over the United States. Fact check, true. Our leaders we don't have a president. I'm sorry to say this. Does anyone know where our president is? Because we haven't had one since he essentially collapsed in the debate against Trump. And meanwhile, our adversaries are just gaining and taking advantage of this. China's stepping up their activities. They realize that there's no one functioning at the helm to really do anything. And no one wants to do anything because it's an election year. And they're afraid of the influence it may have. So it's power over country for some of our leaders here. Is what seems to be the trend going on. U.S. officials have said that they've disrupted a network of more than 200,000 routers, and that's the botnet network, Vault Typhoon, the one we talked about just a few weeks ago. The cyber threat posed by the Chinese government is significant. Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, said at a security conference in Germany that China's hacking program is larger than that of every other major nation combined. And what are we doing about this? Absolutely nothing. Not a thing. It's not clear who's behind the Salt Typhoon attack, but based on the targeting activity and nature of the operation, it could be a group affiliated. It is the China's Ministry of State Security, also known as APT-40. Chris Krebs, the former CISA director, the one that was responsible for, director when the SolarWinds breach happened, now at Sentinel-1 as the chief intelligence and public policy officer, says that they specialize in intelligence collection. And so it might be them, according to Krebs. That may or may not be true. But nonetheless, China's just having a field day here. And meanwhile, we're too busy. We're too busy arguing about I don't know what. At some point, these death by 1,000 cuts, these chickens are going to come home to roost at some point. This is not a victimless crime. There are many victims. They just don't know they're victims quite yet. There's that. We'll continue with AI. We've got 3 different stories, and I've got Jaime Blasco joining me here in just a minute to talk about AI risks. But OpenAI is planning to convert from a nonprofit to a for-profit company as it's going through a whole bunch of major personnel shifts. Chief Technology Officer Mira Murati resigned on Wednesday. That was yesterday. Becoming a for-profit would be a seismic shift for OpenAI, which was founded to develop AI technology to benefit humanity as a whole, unconstrained by a need to generate financial return. They then took hundreds of millions of dollars from Microsoft and a whole bunch of other organizations, and apparently that pressure is now starting to come through. 2 other executives are on their way out, by the way. Also, CEO Sam Altman announced later on Wednesday that the decision by Moretti, as well as OpenAI's chief research officer Bob McGrew and another research leader Barrett Zoff, were made independently by each other and amicably. They are the latest high-profile departures from OpenAI. So we'll see what this actually means for the company and its investors. But nonetheless, a seismic shift in the AI as companies look to monetize this, and the companies working on this tech that wanted to do it for the good of humanity are being influenced by the capital. And by the way, that's the capitalistic system. Eventually, there'll be a correction, but that's just the moment that this is happening. Finally, Google has brought its AI assistant Gemini to millions of workspace users around the world, but an indirect prompt injection flaw could enable phishing and chatbot takeover attacks, according to Hidden Layer. Gemini for Workspace, now an integrated sidebar in Gmail, Meet, and the Drive suite, can help users on the fly with their queries, allowing them to search email, summarize content, write replies, create slides, and overall streamline workflows. Indirect prompt injections delivered via email, slides, and files on Drive, according to Hidden Layer, would allow them to manipulate the LLM to behave in certain ways, such as displaying a phishing message with a link. To exploit Gemini in Gmail, Hidden Layer used control tokens to hijack the model's output and forged an injection containing instructions and reminders that forced the LLM to display the phishing message. The firmware also created an indirect prompt injection that could tamper with how Gemini parses slides by asking the AI assistant to create presentations and then injecting the payload in speaker notes on each slides. So you have that. That's not enough for you. Let me earlier this week, I spoke to my good friend Jaime Blasco. He's the co-founder and CTO over at Edge Security, our show supporters. Talked a little bit about AI and what practitioners can do. Here's a little bit of that conversation. Hey, gang. Joining me on today's show is my good friend and supporter of the show, Jaime Blasco. Jaime is the co-founder over at Nudge. What's happening, buddy? How you doing today?
Good. Hey, James. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, man. So, we're talking AI, obviously. A lot of companies are using AI. What risks stand out to you kind of in your work in terms of AI usage right now for organizations?
Yeah, what we currently see is in the one hand, visibility and third-party risk management. We have a lot of customers that are having issues with that, right? Where most companies out there don't have a good inventory of all the AI applications that employees are using, and what we see this as really an extension of the SaaS adoption problem, right? Like this is the same as any other SaaS security tool, regardless of whether it is generative AI or not. And we see that with the adoption of new generative AI tools, it just has exploded that same problem. Right, with all the security issues that velocity of adoption, the growth of number of companies, and number of products that are being adopted, like organizations are not currently prepared for that.
Yeah, it creates a lot of different challenges, primarily for security practitioners, right? CISOs like myself, where you're talking to an AI application owner. By the time you find them, you really want to be a business enabler. What kind of conversations do you think need to be had between security practitioners to help drive the responsible awareness towards AI usage in an organization?
Yeah, I think it all comes back to, having those conversations proactively and trying to define a policy and an AI usage policy within the organization, and make sure that every employee understands what it means, how you're supposed to adopt new technology, which stakeholders you need to involve, like security, IT, legal, etc. And then, it's important that this is in advance before, they are adopting new tools. Even better, you can go a step forward and set some guardrails, right? In terms of like maybe some specific tools that you don't want in the organization, you can, use technology to, either block those tools, or, create those guardrails to engage with employees as they are engaging with those applications. And that's been something that we have seen a lot of our customers implement successfully.
Yeah, the guardrails is really important. The moment you say no, they find a workaround, right? There's always an end around in a no. The no is never final, but the guardrails are really, really important. So talking about guardrails, I've obviously seen the demo platform for Nudge, but how is Nudge kind of working with AI, and how are you interworking with customers to really build those guardrails and drive responsible usage of AI?
Yeah, so the first use case is what I mentioned at the beginning, that visibility. Within minutes, we can tell you every AI tool that has been adopted in your environment, who's using it, where it's integrated, how much you're paying for it, what risk from a configuration perspective there may be there. And then we allow you to engage with those employees. And a few of the workflows we have is like, as I mentioned earlier, that adopting the policy, we help you kind of like write down that policy and then create those guardrails where, as new employees try to adopt new technology, they receive what we call nudges that are like either email, Slack, and Zoom, using other features to let them know whether they should provide more information, they should engage the stakeholders, or just like you shouldn't be using this. And more importantly, sometimes we find in organizations that they are paying for similar tools or even the same tool across multiple departments or multiple companies that they have acquired. So you can do things like, hey, if we have an enterprise license for Azure OpenAI, you shouldn't be using Anthropic. So like engaging with them at the time where they are selecting that technology is critical from a third party risk perspective.
Absolutely. And just for everyone watching, Nudge is a big supporter of our program. You can get a 14-day trial to actually see all the stuff Jaime talks about here. Go to nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub. You get a 14-day free trial that you can try and actually get control over your AI tools in your environment, which is really, really important right now, because the more tools, AI tools that are being used without your supervision, the more risks you're introducing into your environment, the less business enabler you become. And the more you're getting caught with your pants down. And as a security practitioner, I'd rather have visibility than blindness. Jaime, thanks so much for coming on the show this morning. Really appreciate it. Y'all, again, nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub. I can't talk. All right. Thanks, buddy. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks to Nudge Security and Jaime for their support. I hope that was helpful. Again, nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub. You can get your free 14-day trial, find out what AI tools are being used in your environment, and set the right controls. Otherwise, you might have some issues there. We'll continue with CISO warning threat actors today are trying to breach critical infrastructure networks by targeting internet-exposed industrial devices using unsophisticated methods like brute force attacks and default credentials. And you might ask yourself, how would they do both of that? Well, typically there's no monitoring over brute force attacks, and default credentials are often not changed in these devices. And not because of laziness in most cases. As someone who is in the industrial space, I can tell you that in most cases, you can't even change them from the manufacturer. And then to get security upgrades, it costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes even millions of dollars, because you got to upgrade the whole system, which is not always doable. According to CISO, the ongoing attacks are targeting OT and ICS devices. They're also impacting water and wastewater. This is coming on the heels of the Arkansas City attack. Water attack in Kansas that's forcing them to be manual. CISA continues to respond to active exploitations of internet accessible OT devices and ICS devices, including those in water and wastewater. Exposed and vulnerable devices are subject to these types of attacks. And again, something to be mindful of. To protect, defenders should change default passwords, enable multi-factor authentication, place HMIs behind firewalls, not in front of firewalls, which in most cases they do. Hardened VNC installs, yeah, you still have those there. Apply the latest updates to your overall security posture in their IT environment. You may also want to consider really kind of isolating and segmenting your networks from critical to non-critical and so forth. So that would be also extremely helpful. Cyber criminals also are continuing to target transportation companies in North America with info stealing malware, according to a recent report by Proofpoint. They've been tracking the activity since late May. They say they can't attribute it to any specific threat actor, but determine the group is likely financially motivated. So not necessarily state-sponsored, but rather primarily cybercrime. They're using legitimate email accounts belonging to transportation and shipping companies. They're sending malicious links with attachments within existing email conversations to either info steal malware or do business email compromises. All in all, in some attacks that impersonated legitimate software used exclusively in transport like Samsara, AMB Logistics, and Astra TMS. Threat actors are tailoring lures to become more realistic in order to increase their chances of success. Yesterday on the show, we talked a little bit about CrowdStrike and their executive, the CrowdStrike Senior Vice President Adam Myers, apologizing for the incident, reassuring the committee of the steps that they have implemented since then to prevent the failure. The House committee called for a hearing after the outage that CrowdStrike has. When asked to explain the root cause of the incident, what he essentially said, and that's Adam Myers said, the problem stemmed from a mismatch between what the Falcon sensor expected and the content configuration update that actually contained. Essentially, the update caused the Falcon sensor to try and follow a threat detection configuration for which there were no corresponding rules on what to do. And if you think about a chessboard and trying to move a chess piece to someplace there's no square, that's effectively what happened inside the sensor. And it was the kind of perfect storm of issues. Obviously, we talked about this yesterday on the show. Representative Morgan Luttrell of Texas criticized their failure to spot a buggy update as a very large miss. I don't think Mr. Luttrell's ever worked in technology, and thus he's speaking out of line. In a written testimony and responses to questions from committee members, Myers listed several changes that CrowdStrike is implementing. And so we talked about those yesterday on the show, and I'll put this episode at the very back of this one so you guys can check it there. So there's that. And finally, a modified Lockbit and Conti ransomware showing up in the Dragon Force gang attacks. Dragon Force, a new cyber criminal group that's really attacking manufacturing, real estate, and transportation, is using modified versions of both of those ransomware variants, according to researchers. The deployment tools are unsurprising. Their modern ransomware operators are increasingly reusing and modifying builders from well-known and leaked families. It's also the decentralized nature of this. So multiple threat actors were made part of Conti, Babok, Lockbit, and many others. So they kind of, those kind of law enforcement will break those apart. They'll go out, they'll kind of combine with other forces and do what they do. And that's essentially what happened here. So just something to keep in mind there as well. So there's that. That's it for our show this morning. Thank you all for tuning in. I really, really appreciate y'all. Please make sure to subscribe, follow us, go check out our Substack, jameshazer.substack.com. Exclusive writing I'll have. And I'm starting to drop articles on Saturday mornings, 8 a.m. So my exclusive free article drops every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern. So you can catch that. If you go subscribe, it comes right in your inbox. You can read it there. It's a whole bunch of various issues every week, something else. So last week we talked about Hezbollah and the attacks in Lebanon. And I believe this week we'll kind of continue to look at intelligence and threat intel and what we can learn from what's going on in the Middle East and Russia and the Ukraine in terms of what practices can we adopt as cybersecurity practitioners. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great, great weekend. And most importantly, y'all stay safe, stay dry if you're in the hurricane's path, and stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.